Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Trail Talk Highpointing podcast. My guest today is Terry Bird, the completers tracker of the Highpointers Club. Terry, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much.
So, Terry, I like to ask every guest the same first question. How did you get started in the outdoors?
I have always been out in the outdoors, and we are longtime travelers. I live in Dallas, so we're hot in the summer here. So people in Dallas head to New Mexico and Colorado at the drop of a hat, and so I've been doing that since since the 1950s. So we go to I grew up going to Colorado very frequently. And one of the things we did, we were not serious hikers back then, but we always found a trail to go up to this lake, whatever. As then I started having my own family in the 70s and 80s, we got to hiking more, and we really enjoy going to Estes Park, Rocky Mountain National Park. That's kind of our go back to spot. And we have hacked practically every trail in Rocky Mountain National Park, going up to lakes, going up to peaks. But one thing we are hikers. We weren't mountaineers at that point. We were just hikers, and I'm still not a mountaineer. But so that's how we got into it. Then in the late 80s, we had a pastor at our church who was he backpacked a lot over in New Mexico, and he brought up this issue of going to the high point of all the states. So we got to talking about it, and so we decided to bite that off. And in the meantime, when my daughter was a 14-year-old and we were up at Estes Park, we climbed Long's Peak. And if so, anybody that's into Colorado 14ers is familiar with Long's Peak. That's not an easy hike. It was a tough hike for my daughter. But after we did Long's Peak, it's kind of like you can kind of do anything after you do that. So that's when we made the commitment that we would like to try to do this. And by the way, I'm at 43 high points, so I'm not a 50 guy. But so that's what got us into it. And so at that point, we've always been road trippers. We love road trips. And so we started incorporating high pointing into our road trips. For a period of time there, when my daughter was a teenager, I have two older boys than the daughter. And so when she was a teenager, it was just the three of us, my wife and I and my daughter, and we took a lot of road trips. It's kind of unusual. Our first high point was Guadalupe Peak here in Texas. We did that in over a fall break, which is a good time to do Guadalupe Peak, is in the fall. Mm-hmm. Our second high point was Mount Greylock in Massachusetts. So because what we did is that next summer, we took a long road trip. We went to New York City. We actually only did 3 high points that trip. I really didn't want to rush the high points. I wanted to work them into trips. And so I purposely planned it so that we did Massachusetts, we did Vermont, and we did Mount Marcy, one of your favorite mountains. And so those are the 3 we did on that trip. It was an interesting trip in that we didn't have the appreciation for eastern high points that you do after you go on that trip. Particularly Mount Mansfield. Of course, you can ride up a gondola or ski lift or something to get pretty near the top, but we decided that we wanted to kind of acclimate, so we did one of the longer routes up Mount Mansfield, and it was tough. It's one of the big differences between Rocky Mountain hiking and the eastern high points is just the wet. It is so wet. Coming back down from Mount Mansfield, a lot of it we slid on our bottom because the trail was so muddy and steep.
What time of year was this?
This was in June,
Okay.
which I think is kind of the wet time of the season up there. Then we went over to Mount Marcy, and my wife was going to try that one. My wife has 31 high points herself, but
Hmm.
she was going to try to go with us. But after we got into that trail and found out we were hiking up a small river and that it's very rocky, my wife decided to stop. So she found a rock to sit on, and so she sat on a rock on the Mount Marcy Trail for several hours as my daughter and I went to the summit and back down to get her. So she made friends with chipmunks and things that were there. So bless her heart. But it's one of those that you just make sure you have, if you're doing Mount Marcy, make sure you got your good Gore-Tex boots, and because you are going to be slogging through wet. And I know a lot of your listeners have told the same Mount Marcy story. It
Hmm.
is wet. So anyway, we did those three, and have just incorporated a lot of high points since then. Uh, my daughter also has 31 high points, not the same 31 my wife has, but we did a lot of high points when she was 15, 16, 18, 19, on up into her 20s. But then life takes hold. She gets married, has kids, so she may come back to it at some point in time, but she had to take a hiatus, and I went ahead and did a lot of high points on my own, which got me up to 43. But that's how we started on this.
So is it the whole family that started high pointing together, or was it mostly you and your daughter?
It was mainly my daughter and I, and my wife, because like I said, my wife has 31.
Hmm.
Fortunately, my older sons have also gone with me. We had quite a quite a group go up Mount Elbert because we made that into a Colorado family trip. So I think we had 6 or 7 family members on top of Mount Elbert. Um, it's Colorado, and it was a cool hike. Of course, Mount Elbert is famous for its fall summit, so you just hike and hike and hike and hike. But it is just one foot in front of the other. But we got up there, and there was some people who had hauled up wine, cheese, crackers. So we got to the top, and so they were inviting everybody over to for a glass of wine and for cheese and crackers, and just had a nice little party going up on the top of Mount Elbert. So we always remember that. There were 4 of us that did Boundary and Mount Whitney on a vacation. My oldest son and his wife, and then my daughter and myself, the 4 of us did Whitney and Boundary over a week's period of time. So some of them I've been able to have my other family members along.
That's really special.
One of the cool things about high pointing is if you can do it with your kids and things, that makes it pretty special.
Absolutely. A lot of people say that. And in fact, leading into my next question about some of your most memorable high points, often when I ask people that, they will say certain high points, not necessarily for the peak or the hike itself, but for the experience that they shared with those that they went with. So, what were some of your most memorable high points with your family?
Yeah, what I'm a real Boundary Peak fan because Boundary Peak is, I call it quirky. It's different, and it was, again, we did that as my son and his wife and my daughter and myself. And my daughter's probably 17 or 18 at that time. So she was a little bit older. And of course, you drive in some gosh awful roads to try to find the trailhead. I think it's been improved since then because this goes back to the early 2000s. I should have looked up the date, but it's probably 2003, 2004, something like that. So it goes way back. And I think the trail signs have been improved, but it was really hard to tell what was trail and what wasn't. Exactly where's the summit. But we drove all the way in there, and that was the experience of being so alone. We saw one other hiking group that day,
Wow.
and so it's to be able to go in and Because like when we climbed Long's Peak, there's probably 30 people at the summit. But when you're doing Boundary, you're really kind of out there by yourself. So we saw one other hiking group. And we went up, I think we went up the wrong way. We went up this grease slope. And, Boundary is famous. I know of at least two people. One of them, a very famous person that everybody would know, have gotten disoriented on Boundary and have spent the night out there because they couldn't figure out where they were supposed to go. So Boundaries is unique. My other great Boundary story is we had a guy that, well, he's still a member of the club, but this goes back, I think it was 2017. He had it all planned out that he was going to climb Boundary. It was going to be his 50th peak, his 50th high point. And so he was going to go up with his fiance, and the plan was he was going to propose at the summit. Well, as can happen on peaks, the snowstorm moved in. They were not able to get to the summit, but he still proposed. She still accepted. The next year, they had their wedding at the summit. So they got married for his 50th high point at the summit of Boundary Peak. So Boundary has great stories. It's an interesting mountain, and that's where we're going to have the convention next year. So everybody, come see the quirky Boundary Peak and climb it with us.
Oh, okay. So I thought it was going to be in California. Is the hike?
It is in California, but Boundary Peak, the reason why it's called Boundary is, and I'm pretty sure about this, that there was another peak that was higher in Nevada, and they did some surveying, and they found out that the survey line, that the state line between California and Nevada was in the wrong place. So they moved the boundary line a little bit. And so when they moved the boundary line, that put Boundary Peak, which was in California, it moved Boundary Peak into Nevada, and it became the highest point in Nevada, Boundary Peak. We're going to be staying in the only place around there to stay is in California. It's right on the California border, so it's in California, but the peak for the convention is going to be Boundary, although it is very close to Whitney. So if somebody hasn't done Whitney, then that will be a good opportunity to knock out Whitney and Boundary both.
Oh, that's great. So I was wondering how they were going to manage that when I thought it was going to be like in the Lone Pine area. I thought, well, that's a lot of permits to get for a lot of people. And, people struggle just to get one lottery permit to get up Whitney. I thought, how are we going to bring a group there? But now this makes more sense.
Yeah. And of course, to get up Whitney, I'm sure they'll get some more information on this, but yeah, even when we did Whitney back in, 2002, 2003, whenever it was, we did it. We had to get the permits back then. And, but Whitney's a great mountain. And it is, there is a place, a Whitney Portal store. So everybody needs to visit Whitney Portal store. It is a fascinating place. And the gentleman that still owns it, I was able to visit with him back in the 2000s, but he still owns it.
Yeah.
He is an expert on climbing Mount Whitney. He wrote a book. The title used to be The Big One in One Day. In other words, how to climb Mount Whitney in one day. He's changed the title of that book, but if anybody's interested in it, if you go to Mount Whitney, the Portal store, Whitney Portal store, they sell it through their website. But anyway, it's not called that anymore. But it's a great book in that it tells you exactly what you need, what to expect, and how to tackle Whitney in one day. And that's what we did. Is the four of us did it in one day, which is a full day.
It is, yeah. And Doug from the Whitney Portal is a legend for sure.
Yes. And, so you can go in and actually meet the guy. And talk to him. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, and the restaurant at the Portal store is fantastic as well. We
Yes.
excuse me, we had breakfast when we came down. Well, you can get any meal there, but we ordered breakfast like in the afternoon or something, and it's amazing. Pancakes are so big they fall off the plate. The savory breakfasts are just so greasy. It's just everything you want at the end of a Whitney trip. And then there's like a little gift shop, and I bought a Mount Whitney Christmas ornament that goes up on the tree every year. So yeah, it's a great place. And then the Portal Facebook page and the website is a really good resource on the conditions on Mount Whitney. At any given moment, there's a live cam, and then the conditions are always updated because Doug is an expert on that area. So, do you have any high pointing stories that did not go according to plan?
Well, one of them we had is when we were doing Humphrey Peak for the first time. Again, it was my daughter and her husband at that time, and myself. It was just the three of us. But we had every intention of climbing Humphrey and got there, and they had closed the mountain because of fire danger. It was one of those real serious fire years.
What
And
year was
most
this?
of the time, as people would say, you just go ahead and go. I mean, so what? They closed it. Let's just go. Well, it wasn't that easy because there was a sheriff there at the trailhead, and of course, you kind of go across the ski lift there to kind
Mhm.
of go up the trail, and so yeah, he was parked there, and he was stopping anybody that was going to try to hike Humphrey. So that was a real disappointment. So we had to do it at a later time. But then um, going back to the Grand Canyon area, Flagstaff area,
Mhm.
um, it's never a bad thing. So having to go back there, it's easy to get to. So anyway, we've since gone back and climbed Humphrey and dutifully got snowed on and hailed on and all the things that can happen on top of a mountain as we were doing Humphrey. So it was a tough hike there. And then the other one that bring up is we had the crazy notion, and we didn't realize it was a crazy notion. We did a spring break trip that we were going to knock out some of the southeast high points. We were going to do your North Carolina, and we were going to do Clingman's Dome and some of the others in that area. So uh, we had every intention of just kind of driving up to Clingman's Dome and going up the curvy path up to what looks like a spaceship. And
Mhm.
but what we found out is that a lot of those roads are closed even at spring break.
Really?
And so people are familiar with Smoky Mountains. Know there's a road that runs north and south through the Smokies, and then there's a road that shoots off to Clingman's Dome. Well, that road was closed. You could go across the mountain, but you couldn't go up to Clingman's Dome. And what other people know is that the Appalachian Trail goes through there. So from that
Mhm.
highway to Clingman's Dome, it's 7 miles on the Appalachian Trail to get to Clingman's Dome. So no problem. You can't drive it. We'll just hike it. So we took off hiking up that trail. What we didn't realize is that at that time of the year in that area, those trails, the snow melts and thaws, thaws and freezes, thaws and freezes, thaws and freezes. So what started off as snow just turns into ice. So as we're going up that trail, it is just ice, just slick as it can be.
Yeah.
So we were kind of struggling along we were, grabbing trees and pulling ourselves along. We had hiking poles or trekking poles that wasn't helping a lot, but there were some people coming down, and my daughter at that time was about 17 or 18 or something. And so they implied that they didn't think we could make it to the summit. And of course, after they said that, there was no way we were turning around. So we went up on the ice to Clingman's Dome and made it to the summit. We did hike back down using the road. The road was essentially clear except for spots of ice. Again, not snow, ice.
Wow.
So we just had to dodge some ice on the road. So we hiked back down the road, but that was that was a tough hike. We had not realized was going to be a tough hike.
Yes, you're right. And I think I've had some people on the show who have hiked the AT, and they all say the same thing about winter conditions in that area. Like they did not expect it to be as cold as it gets, as icy as it gets. And, being in North Carolina, I know that the Blue Ridge Parkway shuts down sometimes during the winter just because the conditions are so dangerous. But I guess that's not what comes to mind when you think of this region of the country, but that is a reality.
Yes, we had to go to Mount Mitchell 3 times to finally get it.
Really?
Because we tried to go that trip because we were going to do those high points, but the road, which I said the Blue Ridge Parkway was closed, so you couldn't get to Mount Mitchell.
Mm-hmm.
We went another time, and they were doing remodeling and renovation at the summit. So they had all of it closed off at the summit because they were working on it. But again, that's kind of like going to Grand Canyon and Humphreys Peak. There's not a bad time to go to travel to North Carolina, as you know. And so the third time we were able to make it to the top of Mount Mitchell. And I will add that if we can drive up, my wife is not really a hiker, but she loves going. So a lot of people have the attitude that, hey, you've got to hike to this summit. But it's fun to be able to go with some people who are not hikers. So when we do a Mount Mitchell, we go ahead and drive up and walk the short little path to get to the summit. And so that way, that's why my wife has 31 high points is driving up when you can. It all counts. So
yeah, it does, and that's one of the things that I like about high pointing is how accessible it can be to people that may not want to do an entire expedition. Not that that's what Mount Mitchell is, but you can tailor it, to people's abilities, and especially for families, I think it's a lot more doable.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. I have a daughter, 10 months old. I just took her to Illinois, Indiana, Ohio high points, and I've already done a couple of the ones that I've taken her to. I've already done Mount Mitchell, but I'll take her there again. And I'm probably just going to drive up when I take her there. I'm not putting her in the backpack.
Well, you're not quite onto the road. We're going to talk records in a little bit, but you should have carried her when she was about 1 day old, where you could have gone down our records, because our youngest to a high point is 2 days old. So somebody's got to carry a baby up at 1 day old to beat the record of the youngest to a high point.
I'm good.
Okay, so anyway, that's one of the records that we have.
Well, I think a record that I could be in the running for is bringing my English bulldog up to some high points.
Well, if we want to talk records, we could talk dogs on High Point.
Well, that's a good transition to your role as the finishers tracker, which is also, another name for a records manager of the Highpointers Club. So I first want to know, how did you take on this role? And do you have a background in records management where you offered that to the Highpointers Club, or did you learn this as you went?
I've been a member of the club since, I guess we probably joined around 1999, 2000, something like that. So I'm a long-time member, and in 2017, they put out in the magazine that they were needing somebody to assist with this, primarily keeping track of of completers, finishers, and so I volunteered. That was in 2017. And I kind of got phased into it then 2017, 2018. So it was just, I got into it just simply, just something there that was in the newsletter. I have no training in this. Matter of fact, we keep track of the 48 finishers and the 50 state completers in a Excel spreadsheet. I can work Excel. I'm not completely a Luddite on that, but we have another member who helps me out with just the with just manipulating Excel. But yeah, that's so that's when I took that over, and I've been doing it ever since.
So I've had a lot of guests on the show that often wonder if they are the first of a certain demographic to complete the high points or to attempt the high points. How can they find that out? How can they reach out to you?
Well, we post the records in the magazine once a year. That's the goal. Now, that's there have been years go by that we don't get it posted. One thing about it is it takes up quite a few pages, and one thing about posting a magazine is every page costs money. And so we have everything, the guys, and you've had the editors on your show before, but that's something the editors weigh is, how are we going to, how am I going to get the most bang for my buck? But we typically publish the records once a year. And if anybody ever wants to know anything, I have an email address. It's completers at highpointers.org. And if you get the magazine, if you turn to the first page of the magazine, there's several contact points there, and one of them is me. And so I think it's worded something like for completions, let us know how great you are. Send it to completers at highpointers.org.
That's good.
I also write an article for the magazine. Every magazine, well, except for one, every magazine will have an article from me. And what I do is I write an article primarily to list the people who have finished the 48 or completed the 50 that I know about. And so for me to know about it, it's completers at highpointers.org. One of the things that I've struggled with a little bit, there is a lot of communication going back and forth in other social medias. But we really have to focus in on how is the best way and the kind of the one way, the sure way that I can know something. And for me to know something, completers at highpointers.org, make sure that I know it. The way I like to approach this is when somebody sends me an email that they just finished Granite Peak and now they're a 48 state finisher. I really like to make that person feel like that is the greatest thing you've ever done in your life, because it just about is the greatest thing they've ever done in their life. And so I really enjoy getting those, and I enjoy reading the stories. I've read more stories on problems on Denali and problems on Granite and Gannett and August snowstorms, and so I get all those good stories, and I try to relate some of those in the article when I write them. Try to personalize it just a little bit. So I write the article. I also, when I write the article, I put the caveat in there that if somebody is over 40 high points and they really have in mind that they're going to finish or complete the 48, 50 or whatever, I like to know about that once they start getting close. And I've had email strings going back for years with some people as they have sent me emails that they've, hey, I've knocked out Whitney today, this weekend or whatever. And it's great to be able to follow those people as they start getting close. And if space permits, I also put in my article some of the stories of those people. So and so he was able to do Granite and Gannett this last August, and just try to highlight what they've been able to do. So I try to do that when I'm writing my article. So and I do get feedback on that. So somebody reads it. So everybody read my article.
I will include that email in the show notes so that listeners can reach out if they are close to completing 48 or 50 and or if they have and they want to touch base and get their name sealed in Highpointers eternity.
And also if anybody ever has a question on where they might fall in the records, then I can certainly help them out with that too, and help them out with the with records as well.
So, what are some unusual records that people have reached out about?
Well, yeah, well, I only have like a 14-page document here that's the crazy that are there. But you mentioned, we could just talk dogs on High Point, so I'll look at this here.
Okay.
We have a member, very prominent member, who has a dog that has done 82 high points. And the reason why they've done that is this person has done the 48 states twice. And so in doing the 48 states twice, the dog Luna is the dog's name. Luna has 82 high points. So that's by far the most. But we've had dogs here with 42 high points, 38, 38, 36, 30.
Wait, so Luna went up Granite and Gannett?
I think, I don't. Luna has done 40 on one round. So yeah, okay. Luna's been up a lot of tough high points. I'm not sure how Luna has done that. But anyway.
Okay.
But of more importance, we have one cat that's been on a high point.
I know this cat. Is it Mary's cat? Mary Montigny's cat?
No, but I need to put that down then. Does her cat went to a high point? Okay.
A couple, yeah.
Okay, well, I need, see, there you go. She didn't know that she needed to contact me to let me know that her cat. So now I may have opened a can of worms, and that may
I think so.
hit with cats on high points now. We have one fish. We have a fish on a high point.
Okay. Okay.
We've had a couple of proposals. We had a proposal as recently as 2021 at Wisconsin. We had a proposal. So,
okay. I've had a High Point proposer on the podcast. He proposed on Black Elk Peak.
Okay, see, that's another one I need. See, these people don't know that they.
That's why it's good that we're doing this episode, because now people know who to contact.
And so anyway, that's the type things that's on this. Of course, the biggies are oldest, youngest, fastest. That's always a good one. But the youngest is something that I struggle with, and because I hear this. I don't say all the time, but occasionally you get the person that's sending me emails, or I hear about them from other source that they've got an 8-year-old, 7 or 8-year-old, and they're gung ho, and we're going to go do the 48 states or the 50 states or whatever, and I struggle with that some. Just telling my own story, I mentioned that we did, my daughter and I did Long's Peak, just the two of us. She was 14, and I'm not sure she made it, but I tell you what, going down was tough. She was completely exhausted. So I struggle with this a little bit, and everybody's situation is different. Every kid is different. But I struggle with getting kids that are pretty young, 10, 11, 12-year-old kids on Granite or Gannett. That's a little tough. But again, that's a parent's decision. But I do wonder about it. I
think you're right, and I am an avid consumer of outdoor media in a lot of formats, and I listen to a lot of podcasts about people doing great things in the outdoors. And sometimes I hear a podcast about a family who's taking their kids through hiking, the AT, the PCT, all these other long trails, and then you hear the ages of the kids, and it's like they're toddlers, and I'm like, that doesn't sound fun. And then they'll talk about the experience, and I'm like, none of this is fun. Like, it doesn't even sound like the kids are enjoying it. And I have to say, I've been on a couple trails recently out in California. I was on a trail, and there was a family there with a lot of young kids taking the kids up this peak. And the kids were just exhausted, begging their parents to turn around. And the parents were just adamant, like, no, we are getting up this peak. Stop complaining. Let's go. And I felt so bad for the kids. I'm like, just go back down to town, get a burger, have fun. And when I might edit some of this out, but when I see or read about or hear about super young kids setting records on high peaks, I almost feel like, what's next? And do these kids have an obligation or feel an obligation that they need to perform in order to get mom and dad's attention? Or do they feel like they need to do the next biggest thing when they should just be a kid? But again, that is my personal opinion, and it is the parents' choice on how they raise their children.
But in case somebody is curious on some of these records, the youngest male to do the 48 states was under 10, 9 years, 8 months, and that's been fairly recently. And there was a big family. There were some big brothers on that hike as well. Just looking at it here, I've got on the records 7 males have done the 48 states under the age of 13. Now, when you switch to females, there's a very unusual young lady who did it when she was 12. But that was the ladies or the females. They're the youngest outside of the 12-year-old are 17 years old, and to me, when I look at it, that 16, 17, 18, and I've raised 3 kids, so I kind of know this. There's something switches in their body at that point that does kind of make them able to handle those higher peaks when you get into the late teens. So, but yeah, there's a 17-year-old doing the 48 states. That's very doable. And when you go to the 50 states, the youngest to do the 50 states is a male. We've had a couple of males who are 12 to do the 50 states. Again, you kind of wonder how sometimes the wisdom of that, but these are pretty special kids. And then with the girls, it was 17 years old. So there are some young kids that have done the 48 states and the 50 states. And then you could almost say the same thing about the oldest. The oldest to complete the 50 states is 77. So so that's getting on up there. And there's several that are there. Of course, completing the 50 states, that didn't mean they completed on Denali. They might have completed it Rhode Island, Right. So you don't really know there. I could look it up, but you don't really know.
Right.
I know there was one guy here, 77. It's quite a story. He had done most of the high points, but he had a grandson, a 17, 18-year-old grandson that got really interested in it. So the grandfather, 77-year-old grandfather, with his grandson, finished out with some of, I think they finished out, either Granite or Gannett that they finished on. So they finished on some of the tough high points. So, but anyway, that's a cool story that the grandfather and the grandson got into it, and that's how the grandfather finally finished out there.
That's very special.
Yeah, the oldest female is 78 for the 50 states, and
wow.
So yeah, that's an oldest male on the 48 states, 77 again, and female it was 78.
Wow.
So anyway, that's those oldest and youngest categories, and certainly, again, send me an email if you think you might fit into that. The other category that's very interesting is all 50 after a specific age. when did somebody start?
Right.
That's interesting. And I actually don't have these by female or male. These are just lumped together. But we've had a person who didn't start until they were 66
Oh
and
my
has done
gosh.
the 50 states after
Wow.
age 66. So we had a married couple that started at age 60, and they're 50 state completers. The
Cool.
husband and wife completed together. Um, when you shift over to the 48 states, let's see here. Oldest after, we have somebody there that's 65 that they completed the 48 states after age 65. So that's one though that there could be people out there that I don't know about on that might need to be going onto the list. So anyway, that's a kind of a cool one, is people who didn't start till very late in life.
It's certainly impressive. Now, what do people have to include when they email you stating that they've completed a certain number?
Um, I go back to the Jack Longacre philosophy of looking at this, and of course, I think most everybody knows who Jack Longacre is. He's the founder of the Highpointers Club, and matter of fact, that's one of the things that's kind of cool about doing this is, Jack Longacre. I think the story goes that he was doing the high points, and he would get to the summit of a high point, and the log is there, the ledger, and you'd write your name in it, and he'd start looking at that, and he noticed that people would write down, "This is my sixth high point," or "This is my 47th high point." And I don't remember exactly the phrase he used, but it something to the effect that he found out that there were people out there that didn't have any more sense than he had as far as going around and going to state high points. So he put an article in in a magazine, I think it's Outdoor Magazine, and to see if people would sign up for a club, go to a convention, and thus the Highpointers Club was found. But Jack always looked at it that, hey, we just take people's word for it. If somebody, we're not gonna police this. So yeah, if somebody sends something in to me with that they've done this or done this record, then I pretty well just go with that, they're. I trust that people are going to be honest with me, so just send me in the details.
Now, for the fastest known time, they do have to send proof of, in the form of grid coordinates and time and things like that.
Most of the time, they will send that in to me. The fastest, they are situations where it's pretty well publicized. You find out in advance about that, and now the fastest is.
While we're on the subject of the fastest, now I understand that the clock starts ticking when you reach the summit of Denali.
That's the way people have. If you're going to do the 50 states, that's what you do.
Now, do we keep records of the people who start the clock when they reach the base, when they get off the plane? Because that's often very difficult, waiting out storms and getting all of your supplies up. Getting to the top is, of course, very, very difficult, but it's often those weeks prior that.
Yeah, but well, anyway, that's the way it's always been done, I think.
Yeah.
And I say always because it hadn't been done all that often, but
yeah.
But yeah, the fastest right now is and it's an unusual one, and it needs to be asterisked. But there's a gentleman, Colin O'Brady, who is an adventurer. Really, he's ridden bicycles across the country. He's done the 7 summits, which is the 7 highest points of every one of the continents. So he's a 7 summits guy. And so his effort was pretty unusual in that he had a lot of support. Goodness, he had commercial support. But yeah, he did the 50 states in an incredible 21 days, 9 hours, and 48 minutes. That has been, somebody's gotten close to that very recently. 32 days has been very, very recent. My favorite one on here is actually is number 4. There was a brother and sister, uh, and they're number 4. They did it in 43 days, 3 hours, and 51 minutes. Again, 43 days to 50 states.
Wow.
And but what was neat about them is they pretty much did it on their own. It was not,
No
they
commercial
weren't
sponsors.
supported in any way.
Okay.
They just planned it out themselves. Um, you
Because it
go,
is an incredible logistical challenge between permits, transportation, getting fed in between, waiting out perfect weather conditions. There's so many factors that you can't control, but people go to great lengths to control everything they possibly can.
yeah, and they have to be pretty well trail runners.
Yes, yeah, and skiers.
Well, on the 48 states, again, Colin O'Brady, who's again the adventurer, he did the 48 states in 18 days, 21 hours, and 35 minutes. But again, there was a brother and sister team there that did the 48 states in 19 days themselves, which isn't that much slower than Colin O'Brady. So there's some people who have put some pretty fast times up on that. There was an interesting group. There was a group called the Highpoint Hoppers, and this goes back 20 or 25 years. There was a group of people, and they did it in a little over 30 days. But that was kind of the initial somebody being crazy enough to try to do this, and so they did a 30 days. And again, that was one where they pretty well did it themselves and didn't have a lot of commercial support and things like that. Like Colin O'Brady had more support than probably anybody has ever had since. Although he did do, it's kind of interesting. He did a lot of webcasts when he was doing that back at that time. It's been 5 or 6 years ago now, and his webcasts were kind of interesting because he's a real outgoing guy, and he was visiting with people, talking to them as he was going up mountains, and so he was having a good time while he was posting that time. So
That's cool.
it's an interesting story.
That's cool.
But yeah, fastest, and then of course, if you got fastest, you've got to have the slowest. So
I didn't even think about that.
And again, the slowest. These are the people who, and a lot of them fall into this category. These are people who climbed Denali when they were 17, 18, 19. And we do have those people. You usually think, the culmination is going to be Denali. And we have these people that, they were mountaineers and they climbed Denali when they're young. But then they don't bother about height pointing until they get on up in years. So we have people who, maybe did Denali at 18 years old, but then they really don't start high pointing until they're 60 or 70. But anyway, the slowest to 50 states is 64 years from the start to when they finished, and we've got 52 years, 51 years. So those are the slowest. To get into the top 10 there, you've got to be as slow as 44 years. And if you go over to the 48 states, let's see here, slowest, again, same guy, 64 years. So 62 years. To get in the top 11 there, you've got to be at least 51 years in doing it. So,
I've had people on the show who live in Alaska, and for them to come down to the lower 48 for so many different high points it takes them a long time.
Yeah. And by the way, that is one of the other categories we have is foreign citizens that have done the high points. And we have this listed as all of them. There's been according to our records, and again, if somebody knows something else, completers at highpointers.org,
Mhm.
but we show that we have 8 50-state completers, and they're not all from Canada. That these are
Okay.
Canada, Austria, Sweden, Germany, New Zealand, Australia.
Wow.
By the way, the people from Sweden, they come to every convention, by the way. They're here all the time.
I've heard that.
Australia, New Zealand, and England. So we have 8 non-citizens that we know of that have done the 50 states. And let's see how many have done on the 48 states. We have 14 that have done the 48 states. Again, a lot of the same place. Although we have one gentleman who did the 48 states. He's from the Philippines. That's a little bit of a different spot.
Okay.
But again, mostly it's Europe. So anyway, that's another record that we keep as foreign citizens. The other one that we'd like to keep is, of course, husband and wives. That's a good one. Fathers and sons. We've had, and these are pretty much totals. We've had 13 fathers and sons to do the 50 states.
I saw this in the last Highpointers Club issue, was that those different lists, and I noticed there are no mothers and daughters yet.
There are fathers and daughters, though.
There are fathers and daughters. So I've got a couple high points with my daughter.
Okay, you're gonna be it.
We're in the running. I'll just say that. But I want to know: do the high points count that I did while she was in the womb?
Why not?
Okay, all right. There, we just went up like 5.
Yeah, we'll look at that. Yeah. Now this does bring up something that I always bring out when I'm talking about this. We're up to around 370 50-state completers that are down here that I know that I've got recorded, about 370. Of those 370, only 40 are female. So which is a small number. So if you're a female that does the 50 states, you are a very select individual. If you're a female 50 state completer, because there's not many of them. It's really a who's who of high pointing and mountaineering when you look at the list, because these are very they're very special people. They're by the way, I'm the 4th female to complete the 50 states. Back in '93, she was at the convention this year, so she
cool.
ordinarily always comes. So
cool.
So anyway, so that's another one of those interesting, and like I said, we got mothers and daughters. We've had a lot of families that have just been big families. There's probably, I think, 3 or 4 of them that mother father, mother, kids went up. So we've had a lot of those. We've had 3 sets of twins do the 50 states, which is kind of interesting. When we start talking about brothers. So twins hiking together, that's kind of interesting. Let's see here. We've done slowest.
What about American citizens who are like dual citizens? So, for example, I had a 50 completer named Hugh Rothwell on the show. He was born in England, and I wonder if he might be the first British American to finish the 50.
Now he is on the list. He is listed as a UK guy.
Yeah.
And so he's here. So
okay. What about Mihai Georgiulescu? He's Romanian American. He didn't complete 50 yet, but
Okay, no, I don't have
he's well
him.
on his way. Are there any other Romanian Americans?
No. So
Okay.
he'll be the first Romanian American.
And then I have one more question. There was a guy I had on the show from Mississippi, and he's a 50 completer, and he saved Mississippi for his last. His name was Kelby. James Kelby was his middle name. And he wanted to know if he's the first person from Mississippi to complete all 50.
Yes, we can find that out because the database that we keep, the 48 and 50 states, we put the state they finished or completed on. That state is on the database.
Okay.
So yeah, we can find that out.
Okay.
But I don't think he would be the only one. I think there have been other Mississippi people that.
But like from Mississippi, they completed 50.
Oh,
Okay.
from Mississippi. Now that requires a little bit more expertise. That's where you've got two Excel databases that you've got to merge and then to try to figure that out, or just do it by manually. But
ask your Excel expert to do it. They should be able to
figure that out. Yeah, I think that has been done in the past. We've had posted out where people live that are completing, and we probably need to find that, maybe publish that again sometime, and just go through some other. I don't know how much of this more of this you want, but we've got the youngest, the 2 days. We do have a record for winter ascents, and we have, and I think there's been more of these, and I probably just don't know about it. But we have one person down that did all 50 in the winter.
Wow.
We have the oldest on Denali, which is 78. The other area we have is the 750 Club. We have 11 people in that. The 750 Club is people who have done the 50 states and have also done the seven highest points of the continent.
Wow.
So there's 11 people who have done that,
cool.
Which is highly unusual. We have one of those who has done the 7 summits, the 50 states, and all the Colorado 14ers. Those are people that don't have anything better to do.
That is so cool.
We have 3 people who have done the 50 states and the Canadian provinces and territories. So that's because there's some Canadian ones that are tough. Mm-hmm. We have 2 people who have done the second highest points. So again, if you're into lists, do the second highest points. Then, of course, our famous dogs on Highpoints. We've only had 2 marriages on Highpoints. I mentioned the gentleman that proposed on Boundary, then got married on Boundary, so he's one. But then we have another couple that got married on Mauna Kea, which would be a great place for a wedding. I mean, come on. Yeah, so got married on the top of Mauna Kea. That was way back in 1999, so it goes back a ways.
Okay.
And again, we've had proposals. It's and if somebody has an idea for a record, we're open to other things. But anyway, so that's what I mess around doing, is messing with records and keeping up with 48 and 50 states.
Well, thank you for the work you do, and it sounds so fascinating, and the work that you do is really important too, because we're a niche group of people and we need to be documented.
Yes, and I enjoy doing it. I enjoy the stories.
Yeah. Well, I like to close out each podcast with the same couple questions. So the first question is, how has high pointing in the outdoors enriched your life?
Well, as much as anything, it's just a way that it's draws the family together. And what we do is every third year, every third summer, we take the whole group, which has gotten pretty large, up to Estes Park, and we'll spend most of that time hiking up in the mountains. People are into Rocky Mountain National Park, going to Hallett's Peak, Sky Pond, Twin Sisters, just those places that I've been many, many times. So yeah, it all comes down to being with family, and that's where, with a little bit of challenge to boot.
Yep. And my last question is, do you have a favorite documentary, book, or podcast that is outdoor adventure based that you would recommend to listeners?
Well, the one that I love is, and it's still in print, I'm pretty sure, is the Long's Peak Experience. Okay. Because it is really a comprehensive book of when you're climbing a high peak, such as a Long's Peak, what you need to consider. One of the things he really stresses is, don't rush. If you're sitting there struggling, slow down. You're going to make it. Just go a little bit slower, and you will get to the summit. It's not a race. Slow down.
You're right. That's great advice. Well, Terry, thanks for your time. Thanks for coming on the show, and thank you for the work that you do for the Highpointers Club.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for doing the podcast. This is great.